ようこそメインルームへ。
Today we are going to be talking about a game that came to my knowledge a few months ago through the most trustable and diligent sources, a game that ended up leaving me quite intrigued about some of its most well-known artistic choices and infamous content, Euphoria. Now you may be asking yourself, isn't this video game just an excuse for fetish porn? And yes it is, but it also has a story which could be considered above the average for this type of video game. That being said, why would anyone waste their time reading for hours on end while being presented with some of the most bizarre and degenerate imagery, which seems to come directly from the rotten mind of some 18th century Frenchman? Well, why wouldn't you? Setting:
Jesus Christ, Denton.
You wake up in a white room, not knowing how you ended up in this place. You wander around and find 6 women who also just woke up in said place. Those will be your companions throughout the events of the story, except for one of them who ends up feeling electrified by a certain disagreement with the rules of the game, which is about to commence. The game is just like one of the works of the Marquis of Sade, only if he was heavily inspired by the Saw franchise, and was Japanese. Your job as the protagonist of this novel is to beat 5 levels in order to earn your freedom. Every level is beaten in a round, in which you have to choose one of the girls and use her to open a room. The room is opened by unlocking its keyhole using a key that is provided in every level, alongside with the requirements for the level. You as the unlocker has to use said key to open the keyhole in accordance with the requirements, with each level necessitating certain actions that make use of their specific keys. So basically, to clarify things for those lacking in cognitive abilities and not able to understand the rules of the game, it's basically gameplay.
I seem to be wounded, but...
There is no gameplay, you only click to jump over the dialogue and make a few choices throughout the game, probably so it can be played with only one hand, perfect for anyone who suffered a hand or wrist injury. In the game's menu there are also a series of settings for the sound in different scenarios, actions and specific characters, providing a ton of customization for your personal tastes. Talking about personal tastes, you can also turn off a series of effects and CGs, which I highly recommend you to do. The game itself works surprisingly well, not needing any tweaks or mods for it to work. The translation is good and the art for the sprites is actually good, though the backgrounds are constantly reused. If you want to play this and for some reason do all the routes, and all the endings, the game will take about 30 hours. But that is a waste of time, since at the end of the day you are going to be reading the same dialogue over and over again with some slight differences and newly added lines and different routes. You should instead just jump over all the dialogue you already read, which will be in blue, and rush through the CGs. If you are playing for the story, you will be able to get to the real ending in about 8 hours, or less. The rest is completely optional and most likely just material for you to beat your meat to. The soundtrack is really good with 15 tracks who play in different situations and moments in the story. The voice acting is also really good.
What the heck?
Story. The story is divided in routes with all assortments of endings, though unless you are some sort of masochist or just have a lot of time to waste, most of the routes are completely useless. The routes are chosen by selecting the same girl 5 times in a row. To get to the true ending you need to beat the game 2 times, the first by choosing Nemu repeatedly and do ever more degrading acts against her, and at the end of the 5 turns being able to escape the white rooms by saving, almost, all of the girls from a series of Saw-esque contraptions, thereby escaping the compounds. The novel then turns into an even more bizarre series of events, with the school being taken over by maniacs controlled by Nemu herself. You then join a sort of death cult controlled by another of the girls, culminating in a failed rebellion by the cultists, and after a series of even more bizarre acts, this ends in you almost strangling Nemu to death, although the protagonist chickens out and in the end the credits roll. After that hellish ride you might be asking yourself, that thing makes no sense at all, and yes it doesn't, that's why you have to play it again. But now with a difference this time. In the selection screen on the start of each turn you can now pick Hikari, your childhood friend, and do a bunch of terrible shit to her, with the story playing out in a very similar way with minor changes until the big twist. which is that Nemu is your actual childhood friend and Hokari is actually a scientist working to create a virtual reality prison where the whole game happens. She basically put you there because of a bet she made with Hokari in order to save you. In this bet they would switch their personalities, and in order for Nemu to win she would have to get killed by the main character. You may be saying that this doesn't make much sense and is just some unnecessary plot twist, and you would be right. Though this is just a heavily resumed version of the plot, because I don't pretend to write a 10,000-word dissertation on the intricacies of what is essentially a collection of Japanese smut. But keep in mind that the whole plot twist is better presented in the game than in this video. Now if you wanna know more about the cult stuff you have to play Byakuya's route, which I will not go into in detail because I'm already tired of writing this. The only thing that I will say is that she actually is the main character's daughter. How that happened I have no idea, but I will leave you with that. Conclusion. To wrap it up, the game is great, that is if you have a serious case of neurosyphilis, is a degenerate of sorts, a foot fetishist, furry, an avid reader of 18th century French libertine novels, or like to consume content for the plot. Anyways, I am sure you are going to leave this, either stunned by the depth of the plot and characters or completely disgusted.